Hi, I'm Tricia Brennan. In line with my ongoing commitment to helping people discover more of their true self, I recently did an interview with Michael Rhodes regarding the current shift that we're facing on our planet as we evolve as a collective consciousness. I hope you enjoy the wisdom and insights this gifted visionary has to offer.
First and foremost for me, there is no set, fixed future. Often people say to me, what do you think the future is going to be around this 2012 issue? And I say, well, which future would you like? And they don't understand what I'm saying. So all time occupies the same space. So the future and the past, all part of the present. And so for every human being, that so-called future can be probably different. Because we have different states of consciousness. Linear time is something we've made up. It's our construct. It belongs in three-dimensional reality. So when you're out of that, that linear time is not so important. So I wanted to look at what happens with 2012 and beyond. And what I have seen is many, many probabilities. All probabilities, depending on a person's state of consciousness. Now, as I look back through the time, I found that every time there has been a serious event, the solar winds are blown in close to the sun, and the sun has flared a lot. That's happening now. They tell me, I haven't personally checked it, but about 7 or 8 years ago, the sun reversed polarity, north and south reversed on the sun. And so there's something going on galactic-wide, not just on this planet. Many of the planets have global warming, not just here. Mind you, probably the critters on there are not paying carbon tax for it, but still. And so we have this situation on Earth, 2012. So there's been a tremendous amount of hype. There's been a tremendous amount of pure speculation written on it. There are those who say this will happen, that will happen. You can't do that, because that's just a game we play. So everybody creates their own reality, and that doesn't stop. So when you get to 2012, some of the scenarios that I've seen, one possibility or probability event, nothing happens. That's the worst possible scenario. If nothing happens at all, which is one probability, then we're in big trouble. Within the next 25 years, we wish we'd had a 2012 event. That's one probability. Another probability is that nothing will appear to happen. But in fact, over the planet, there will be sweeping across it, not as a wind that you feel when you go outside on a windy day, but as a wind that blows with a higher energy level, a higher frequency. And that will affect everybody, every human being, whether we know it or not. And nothing will appear to happen beyond that. But when people come to the end of this current life they're in physically, when they incarnate again, then they will be in a completely different reality frame where they fit. So in other words, we won't all be in the same bag the way we are on this planet. Murderers with saints. We won't be that way. It'll be much more of a clustering of each type of consciousness, not in any way as a judgment, simply birds of a feather flock together. It's one of the principles, and that will happen very, very strongly. That's a probability. So in other words, everybody will incarnate and never know that anything was any different from the incarnation they find themselves in. Another probability pattern I saw was that these winds of change, and when I say wind, as I want to repeat, I'm not necessarily talking about a physical wind, but the winds of change will blow across the planet and will form like envelopes of energy, gateways of energy, and which people may or may not see. Very sensitive people, aware people may see them. Most people won't see them. But you could be walking along with a group of, shall we say, 20 people. And some of these gates will be many kilometers wide, some of them will be meters, some of them will be hundreds of kilometers wide, depending entirely on the consciousness of where they're attracted, because they will be attracted by human consciousness, where they form these what I call folds or envelopes. So you could be walking along with a group of 20 and you could walk into one of these with that group, and 2 or 3 of them might be friends of yours, and you're very consciously on your journey. You're really doing your best to live from the heart and to live in a way that raises your consciousness. And then you walk out of the envelope and suddenly there is not 20 people there, there's 17. And people wander back, well, what happened? 3 people are not here anymore. Cat is though. And so 3 people are not here anymore. And nobody will know where they disappeared. Even in our reality today, people disappear by the thousands every day and all over the world. Nobody knows where they go. Some of those bad endings and some of them different endings. And so you could get a scenario also where, let's just say we're talking, one of the things I teach is unconditional love and what that is about. So let's just take a scenario, and this is purely a hypothesis of a tsunami sweeping across a huge area, and people know it's coming. You can turn and run. That is the old fear pattern. But if you know that you're an immortal being, that you are a soul with a body, not a body with a soul, but a soul with a body, and you know you're immortal, you know that you're that soul, and you decide, I choose love. I'm finished the fear patterns, I'm finished survival only, and you walk toward the tsunami. And you're saying to yourself or saying aloud, I choose love. I choose miracles. I choose the highest. I do not, finish with fear. I choose love. You could be walking toward it and 2 probabilities again appear. One is that the tsunami will smash your body to smithereens, but you'll find yourself in a completely different reality, a new world reality. Shall we say utopia, heaven on earth? Because there's already with this planet, there is another planet of a higher vibration, just as there's planets with a lower vibration. Or, before the wave hit you, you could simply ascend. In other words, every cell of your body simply vibrates to a higher pattern and you appear to disappear. Or you appear to disappear, how's that? You seem to disappear and you appear in another reality frame which accommodates your higher frame of energy. Some of the probabilities are that that love shall inherit this earth, and that those who have love in their hearts, it's nothing to do with what we know. I have a lot of spiritual knowledge. It's nothing to do with that at all. It's exactly who we are in our hearts, the way we live our life, the way our relationship with ourself, our relationship with other people, our relationship with the planet. That's a determined factor in consciousness. And so there are those who, some probabilities are where those people inherit the earth and the whole vibration of the earth is raised. There's another probability pattern I saw where the masses inherit this earth and the higher vibrations lift to a higher level of consciousness onto a whole new earth. And so there are many, many, many probabilities, and every one is decided by us personally. So what some of the group scenarios I'd rather not go into because they're not quite so pretty. I mean, you've got to realize that maybe, and I'm being generous, 3 to 5% of the world's population is really consciously trying to raise its consciousness, live love, choose love in every opportunity. That's a tiny proportion, and yet that runs into many millions of people. And so the probability is there, and I saw this probability for the probability is there for the greatest ascension of human souls from one shift of dimensional shift of 3-4 up to a higher dimensional shift of 5-6 than has ever been in any of these cycles. But you need to remember, through those previous cycles, there have been people ascend who have grown in consciousness. We're not just reaching a place where this is a new thing, but we are reaching a place where this, shall we say, a probability event is going to affect human consciousness more than any other event. And it has to, because otherwise we're heading to nowhere. I won't go into it, we're heading into a rather unpleasant place. historically, yes, we've grown through adversity. We actually believe that you can fight for peace. I mean, how stupid is that? What sort of brain came up with that? Intelligence looks at it and says, pardon me? Intellect looks at it and says, yes, that makes sense. And this is what we've become. So it's like a paradigm shift in consciousness. But the only people who are in that paradigm shift, who are people who have been focusing on growing in consciousness, they're the tiny minority. The majority, it's not there's no loss, nobody's lost, nobody's doomed, nobody's damned. But, you know, I don't need to be on the same planet with murderers. I don't need to be on the same planet with all the rules, all the laws. You know, you could be on a planet where there are no rules, there are no laws. You don't need locks on your doors. Where I came from, there were no locks on doors. There was no police force. In other words, your force. There was no air force and armies and any of that. There were no fighting forces because there was no opposition. You know, our growth has been through... I'll tell you how opposing ourselves. Looking back, I look back, metaphysically journey back to the times when human beings were in the early stages. And I'll simply go to a point, without trying to explain it all, where suddenly we were needing to survive. From being a long time in a very idyllic situation as vegetarian fruitarians, very whole brain, suddenly there was an event and we were needing to survive because we're the prey. And predators were finding us easy to eat. And during a stage of evolution, in our left brains, we began to create a chemical cocktail which we felt as fear. And from fear, we learned to survive. We climbed trees, we ran, we developed weapons. Then there came a time, over eons of time, when we didn't have predators, unless we went looking for them. And so we still got this part of us in the left brain that is still creating fear, fight, survive. And so we continued then to fight each other, and we created wars and we fight each other. And then you get to a country like Australia where we don't have internal wars, and then we turned on ourselves. And so we each became our own predator and our own prey. The victim and the victimizer of ourselves, the torturer and the tortured of ourselves. That consciousness for some people has ended. I don't have that consciousness. You don't have that consciousness. Millions of people do not have that consciousness and are not going to grow so capably with it. So they will move into another reality. The ones who've created that for themselves and are not ready to let go of it will continue. For those who believe that everything is about making money and you only live once, well, in a way they're right, aren't they? Except it's eternal. Who only live once and one life you're gone, those people who live that, they've got to live out that belief. They've got to go right through that pattern. If you suddenly went, you're awake, enlightened, what was the point of their lives? You know, they didn't need to do the whole thing to discover for themselves and find their own self-worth, their self-value, and that momentous moment when you realize, not intellectually, but you know you're an eternal being. That incredible inner experience, you've just taken it away from them. So they're going to continue their path to find out what this is, what a human being is, like who am I? And so everyone, every person, the probability is will find themselves in their own perfect state of consciousness. They will be with everyone who has a similar state of consciousness, different skills, different personalities, different people, but a state of consciousness that is loving or benign or however it is.